and welcome to another new episode of Time Mag LP Discusses. This is like our sixth episode, I think.
Wow, that's not too bad. Longer than I thought we'd be.
Oh, it's even longer still, considering we skipped 2 weeks. But hey, this week, rather than questions, I just have two topics,
Okay,
and you don't have anything, so it's going to be a short week this week. But that's okay.
I'm okay with that.
Um, so the two topics, since like I said in my message to you off this, at some point we're going to run out of questions. So
Hmm.
sooner or later, I figure we're just going to turn to topics based around the stuff that we're playing.
Okay.
So continuing off, do you remember if it was on recording when I started to form my thought about Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and then
I was wondering that myself. I honestly don't remember.
well, I started to formulate this last week, but didn't have it a solid enough grasp on what I was trying to convey that I let it drop. So I've talked through it with somebody else, and I can uh, safely explain what I was trying to get
Okay.
at. So basically, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, now that I'm about 22 hours into it, I'm really enjoying it a lot. I think
Okay.
it's a very overlooked game, and I think that a lot of the reasons that people have for not liking it are petty,
Okay.
and it really deserves to have a chance.
Okay.
And or like if you're against the censorship, it sucks. I know, but what the fuck can you do?
Got it anyways.
It's still a good game in spite of that.
Okay.
But big smelly butt time. It's one of those games that from the start you can tell it's not gonna be a 10 out of
A
10
top
game.
tier game. Okay.
In the same way that Tokyo Xanadu, they both start with Tokyo in it. Drives me
Yeah.
nuts. But that's another game where as soon as you play it, you know that it's not going to be a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really figure out why that is.
Okay.
And that's because I think it's one thing but in multiple areas. And I think it has to do with effort across the
Okay.
board. So
Okay.
just to pick one starting area, the thing that just like immediately stuck out for me in both games,
Yeah.
character animations are stiff.
Yeah.
They don't have like a really natural feel to them like in
They feel like blocky characters and less like less like people and more like characters.
yeah, in Tokyo Mirage Session your run cycle is really goofy.
Okay.
I mean in battles the animations are great, so at least there's that.
Yeah.
But your run cycle is really fucking goofy, dude. Especially
Okay.
in the dungeons with your sword. Boy, it looks some goofy shit. But
Hmm.
that on its own is not enough to give this overall feeling because Cold Steel is another game where the animations are very stiff.
Yeah.
But every other aspect of the game has a lot of effort and love put into it.
Yeah.
So the animation is just like the starting point. It then extends into like the plot and the characters. So I'll take the plot because again, this is something I can draw parallels to with like Tokyo Xanadu.
Okay.
It has to do with how well the sort of metaphysical stuff is planned out and integrated in with the real stuff.
Oh,
Because,
like how well it meshes together?
well, because what makes the appeal of using something in a real setting is that it gives it that easy to connect
Relatability.
to, yeah, relatability.
Okay.
But the problem is when people don't react to things in real ways, it makes a disconnect and you start losing that relatability.
Makes
So,
sense.
what I mean by that is like, let's take the metaverse in Persona, because
Okay.
that's a series that does it extraordinarily well. It does a phenomenal job of balancing the familiar with the metaphysical.
Yeah.
it's not something that everybody knows about, for starters.
Hmm.
And it's something that people forget about when they come into contact with it.
Yeah.
But in every instance, when people do come into contact with it, it's a huge deal.
They kind of freak the fuck out a little bit.
So, in both Tokyo Mirage Sessions and Tokyo Xanadu, there's an event that took place in the past.
Hmm.
In Tokyo Mirage Sessions, it's and the game opens with this. It's young Tsubasa at an opera house with her sister is one of the performers,
Okay.
and everybody in the cast disappears, and everybody in the opera house disappears except her. Like over 500 people just
Vanish.
vanish,
Okay.
and
That's kind
this
of fucking weird.
and this is just kind of like treated as a weird incident.
Okay.
Like if something like that happened in real life,
That would be
people
major news.
yeah, people would be like, the fucking rapture is coming. There'd be doomsday cults. There'd be religious nut jobs. Like, it'd be a huge fucking deal.
But in Mirage Sessions, it's not. It's just a weird thing that happened.
Yeah, and also in Mirage Sessions, there are similar events where people go from being, like the big scary thing happens and it drains the people of their spirits, basically.
Okay.
And then you go into the dungeon and defeat the thing, and everybody gets their spirit back. And
Weird, but
this
okay.
happens multiple times throughout the game. But it's like if people are going to, especially what are televised events most of the time, because it has
Hmm.
to do with performances in the entertainment industry,
Okay.
and people are just like mysteriously uh, like becoming docile and losing all their souls and whatever,
Hmm.
someone's gonna notice. They try to like paste over in the game by like, yeah, they talk to the police and stuff and whatever, but yeah, fuck that.
So honestly, that sounds a lot like Persona 3 with the whatever the hell disease they called it.
The apathy syndrome.
Yeah.
But with apathy syndrome, it was actually reported on quite a bit. If you watch the TV,
Yeah.
it was treated like a huge deal
Hmm.
and was actually given weight. It wasn't just swept under the rug. It's like, yeah, this is happening. People are aware of it happening and they're confused. It's national news.
And they don't have any of that kind of reaction in
Mirage
Mirage Session.
Session, no, they
Okay.
don't. They just kind of roll with it.
Okay.
And it's the same in Tokyo Xanadu with the gateways that open up.
Yeah.
The eclipse. It's like there's this metaphysical world that exists alongside the real world, and
And
despite
everyone's just is like, cool. Okay, this is a thing now, and
and
it's
they,
not like a major revelation like it should be.
yeah, like people are just way too okay with it. Even the fact that there was that earth-shattering, like the whole town got destroyed
Hmm.
5 years ago, I think it was in the story,
Something like that. Yeah.
and they just rebuilt it, and I guess that was that.
And that was it.
And again, I'm not saying this makes it bad because I enjoyed both games. It's just the
But it's
difference
another step of the quality. Yeah.
and how people think about these things. Like Mirages in Tokyo Mirage Session, what are they? And the story is
Okay.
just kind of content for them to just be there.
Okay.
Personas, meanwhile, have a contextual a real world. They're based on Jungian psychology.
Yeah.
And so it's a real thing, and it's just saying it's the physical manifestation of this concept. And
Okay.
they even go as far as to explain why they take the shape of demons and mythological creatures.
Yeah.
It's all explained and
Okay.
justified. Whereas in something like Tokyo Mirage Sessions or Tokyo Xanadu and a lot of these other games that are sort of at this level, that they're just like, roll with it. Like, just fuck it. It is what it is. Roll with it.
It's a game. Just live with it. Yeah.
And that's, in the plot details. It's also in the characters, where the
Hmm.
characters aren't as rounded as you would get in something like Persona or Cold Steel,
Yeah.
where, Cold Steel is another one where the world is very well thought out.
Yeah.
And the characters are round and thought out.
Yeah.
Whereas in Tokyo Mirage Sessions and
Xanadu.
Xanadu, the characters play almost exclusively to their tropes.
They're very tropey characters. They fit their role and they play their role.
And like, to use a character that I know a lot of people don't like, but Ryuji from Persona 5,
Okay.
he is a hot-headed guy who often makes impulsive choices.
Yeah.
But I think it's also easy to forget that he's also the one who usually picks the targets.
Mm,
He plays a role in the calling cards. Yeah, Yusuke designs them, but like the earliest one, he wrote it.
yeah.
He actually plays an integral role in the Phantom
He does.
Thieves and has
Like he
moments.
does.
Yeah, and has moments where he's not dumb.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's impulsive and irrational, but he's not always the
Not
idiot.
always just an idiot.
Yeah, that's not the one note that they play over and over and over.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that that in and of itself makes him suddenly this well-rounded
Great
character,
character.
but it's the first step to making a rounded character is not playing off that one trope.
Hmm.
And that's where these other games, again, it's not that they're bad, it's just that immediately identifiable difference in quality.
It's another B note.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's when you take all of these things together.
Okay.
It's not just the plot, it's not just the characters, it's not just the animations. It's when you get all of them at once that I think instinctively you get this
You just
sense that,
realize this is like a double A or like a B game.
yeah, like this is going to be a fun game, but it's probably just going to be like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, I even at a 7 out of 10, I think it's criminal
To
how
ignore it.
how Mirage Sessions just got brushed under the rug because for all its flaws, really the combat is a blast.
Okay.
So that's just kind of wrapping up that thought. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's where I was kind of going with it.
No, I mean, it's a B game. That's a thing. The double A's or the B games that are cheaper, smaller, shorter, not quite as polished, but they're still just a solid time.
Yeah.
That's a thing, and it's a thing that needs to be there, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not
So, yeah, I'm cool with that.
okay. I just didn't know if you'd be like if you'd just disagree or something because it's not because like I said, Cold Steel is a game that doesn't have the animation budget because
No,
they were made on a budget. But in every other facet, it plays just as well as a AAA game.
yeah, it
In
plays.
terms of the characters and everything else.
It's like a triple A game as far as writing and mechanics, but as far as presentation, that's where it lacks.
Yeah, and in that case, because it's just one lacking thing, you can overlook it.
Hmm.
Whereas in these other cases, it's just
There's a
more
little bit of
apparent.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that was pretty much it. Just
Yeah.
and
B games are a thing. They have their place, and sometimes they're good.
and why you can really, because it's not just about being critical of the B games.
Hmm.
It's also about really appreciating what makes the A games, the AAA games, what makes those games so good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just about being critical to berate something
Yeah.
because it's not like I want to berate these games that I enjoy. It's
Hmm.
understanding what makes the games that I
Why
enjoy
they
more.
feel okay.
Why do I enjoy them more? What is it about those games that I do enjoy more?
Because they have that extra level of polish or quality just kind of spread throughout.
Yeah, and being able to appreciate it too.
Hmm.
Like Persona 4 story, massive spoilers for anybody who has not played this fucking 12-year-old game yet. But I really playing it with my dad appreciate in another way, kind of looking it through his eyes, through a new person's perspective,
Hmm.
how well the story is put together because
Okay.
everything has an explanation. It's like, why does the protagonist gain the ability to go into the TV? Oh, because he shook the hand, with
Like,
the
well,
using
here's why.
and why why do people appear on the Midnight Channel has an explanation. Why the killings take on the form that they do has an explanation. You know, it's Adachi convincing the other guy to do it. It works.
Everything has its reasoning. You don't have to take anything on faith because there's reasoning and justification for everything.
Yeah, and that it's great. I appreciate it, especially as somebody who has tried to write a mystery.
Hmm.
I really do appreciate how much they took the extra mile to make sure that it's
To
consistent
answer the
by it.
questions.
Yeah, and it's consistent by its own logic.
Okay.
And that's the extra mile in those games that makes them, that elevates them. So going from that to my second sort of topic,
Okay.
because it's something that I still see. I saw the other day a thread online about this. I still see this discussion to this day. And that's why does Final Fantasy 13 get, or rather, why does Final Fantasy 10 get away with being linear, but 13
But
doesn't?
13 doesn't. Okay.
And I finished Final Fantasy 10 2 days ago,
Okay.
and I started 13 yesterday.
Nice.
And I have played through both games before,
Hmm.
so I feel comfortable talking about this.
All right.
And
It's been a while.
you've
It's
played both of
been a
them. It's been
while.
a while, but
Been a while since I played 10, but 13 it hadn't been too long.
um, so right off the bat, something that I wanted to say that I think is huge.
Okay.
Fixed camera. Thir-
Okay.
10 has a fixed camera. And when you have a fixed camera, you can do a lot of camera trickery to make areas feel a certain way.
Hmm.
So if you want to make an area feel claustrophobic, you can do an overhead shot and come in close.
Yeah.
If you want to make an area feel expansive, you can pull it low, behind looking up
Yeah.
and, show the skybox and everything.
You can trick what it looks like by framing it.
Yeah.
Whereas
And
with the mobile camera, it just looks like what it looks like because you can't really put it anywhere.
well,
Or you
it's
can
a
put
it's
it
a
everywhere.
it's a player controlled camera, so you're
Yeah.
surrendering that ability to create and craft.
Mm.
And this is the problem Tails has struggled with. This is why this popped into my head eventually.
Okay.
Because if you play any Tails game ever since they went to a player controlled camera, the environments became god awful.
Because they were the same environment basically, but they didn't look the same or feel the same because of the way the camera was.
Yeah, they couldn't use camera trickery to try and disguise the fact that most of the environments are just like straight lines or blobs.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, it just you can see the environment, and it's not
You
as
can see
engaging.
that it's a straight line or a blob now.
Yeah, and that ties back into 13, especially because it's like now it is clear as day that this is a hallway,
Yeah.
and that's one reason I think.
No, that makes sense.
Um, Another one has to do with I think Final Fantasy X is more traditional in the vein of what people expect from Final Fantasy.
Like as far as combat and narrative and all that stuff goes, or
Yeah, so combat is turn based.
hmm,
Yeah, 13 uses the ATB system sort of,
but
but you
it's
use
not
yeah, it's
like
such a modified version.
yeah.
13 only has two stats.
Okay.
Like it only has strength and magic. Like there's no defense, magic defense, luck.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, those things that people expect.
In a Final Fantasy game,
Yeah, and I think that makes it easier to accept 10 when what you're looking for is Final Fantasy.
then you've still got most of Final Fantasy. It's Final Fantasy in the hallway, but it still feels like Final Fantasy. Whereas 13 is different in multiple ways, so it just kind of feels like a whole
New thing.
new hallway. Yeah.
And it even has the more traditional things like you can talk to NPCs, which you can't really do in 13. It has those cities where you can do your shopping, which 13 didn't have any of.
No,
And I think the presence of those things,
makes it feel more world-like.
yeah, make not
'Cause yeah, you're right. It's like 13 still had a city, but you didn't like wander around it and go to shops and everything like a city. It was still a hallway through it.
yeah, and
Okay. Where 10 having that big open city kind of still made it feel like you were part of a world, not just part of a hallway.
well, it didn't even have to be big, and this somewhat ties into another point that I have that I'm noticing with 13,
Okay.
and that's that 13 doesn't take it doesn't have much breathing room, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So like 13 starts right out the gate with a bang.
Yeah.
You're on the fucking train, and then Lightning's fucking doing lightning, like snapping her fingers and floating around and kicking people, and
Yeah.
then there's this big like rebellion thing, and
It's nonstop.
like shit happens, and then you go in and you go to the sea, and then you crash to the ground, and things kind of slow down insofar as there's not a war around you anymore, but
Mm.
there's still you're still pushing forward, and it's like there's never a point where the game just kind of like stops to breathe.
Un until until the big random open part later on. Yeah.
But that's like way late in the game.
Yeah.
Um, and the towns part of the cities, I think in 10 is that ability to just slow down. You know
Okay.
where the
Like disconnect from the story and everything else and just take a break.
yeah, like go around, talk to NPCs, do your shopping, do whatever. Like yeah,
Okay.
this is your downtime from the
From
the
saving the world.
the combat loop.
Okay.
The exploration combat loop. Then you have this sort of talking to NPCs, world building part of it that 13 doesn't really have.
It has very little of all of that.
Well, what's weird is that it has world building.
Yeah.
You just have to read it, and that's something I've really noticed this time because I decided this time I would try to read some of it,
Okay.
and right off the bat, it contextualizes things so much more. But
Okay.
but it doesn't help that some of the terminology is fucking awful. So like the whole start of the game, the premise is there was a pulse fallacy located in Bodum,
Hmm.
which was this little seaside village.
Yeah.
Like they thought it was nothing, but then it turned out it was a pulse fallacy. So they, because the pulse fallacy can make l'Cie, they gathered everyone up and they were going to exile them to Pulse.
Yeah.
Uh, but then they just started killing them
Okay.
instead of exiling them. Like the exile was a ruse so that they could just use it as an excuse to start killing them to make sure that there were no,
And
nobody became a l'Cie.
they just hide them somewhere off and then kill them out of sight.
Yeah, stick them on a bunch of, trains, ship them off, and then kill them.
Okay.
And do you know what this supposed exile was called?
Oh, the purge.
The Purge.
Yeah.
real fucking classy, really hides what you're trying to do. It's like as a player when you start talking about the purge, you're like, wait, they weren't just going to kill everybody? I thought that was fucking obvious when it was called the fucking purge.
Yeah.
So just some misrepresentation of phrasing right off the bat. I mean that's not really like a 1310 thing. It's just something that I think people have a harder time when it comes to getting into 13, or things that sort of might immediately turn people off.
Yeah.
The just amount of terminology that is thrown at you from the start.
Yeah. I mean, I get your point. I'm not sure how much I agree with it because it's all just weird fantasy terminology, and that's to be expected. But I understand your point.
I just know that it's one of, I hear frequently, the biggest complaints of the game.
Yeah.
Is it's like, what's a fal'Cie? What's a l'Cie? What's a C? What is this shit? You're all
Yeah.
throwing it at me, but you're not taking any time to explain what it is. And that's usually where those slower moments, like to contrast it against Seven's opening, since it's heavily inspired by Seven's opening.
Hmm.
You spiky hair protagonist and black dude with gun on a train.
On a train. Yeah.
Um, there are those moments even in Seven's openings where the members of Avalanche stop and
Kind of
explain
talk a
to
little.
you what the fuck is going on.
Okay.
Like, Mako energy is bad for the planet. Gotcha. Okay, I know sort of what's going on now. Thanks.
Yeah.
And it's just taking that time to help exposition dump. But
Okay.
but and this ties into another reason that I think 10 is more approachable than 13 for most people.
Yeah.
10, and this ties into the reason 7 could do it that way. 10 has the benefit, and it's one of the oldest storytelling methods in the book, of the outsider comes to a new world,
Yeah.
which is great from a storytelling perspective because then people
Because
have
you have
reason.
a reason to explain everything.
Yeah, people have a reason to exposition dump you.
Hmm.
In 13, you don't get that because every single character is established. They know what's going on. They know what all this stuff is.
So there's no excuse to explain it, basically.
Yeah, and they talk like they know what all this stuff is.
Hmm.
And that's fine. You can do that. You just have to come up with some other way of filling in that information for the viewer.
For the player. Yeah.
And they do. The thing is, it is
In
there.
text,
Well,
in long, boring text, and later on in the game.
yeah, some of it's there in long text, but they do kind of explain it. It's just there's so much terminology being thrown around, it can be hard to keep track of what's what.
Okay.
Like I didn't realize that Sanctum was the government.
Yeah.
I thought Sanctum was like the military,
Okay.
but it's like no, that's the name of the whole government. Okay, I wish like I found that out because I read it in a log.
Yeah.
So the way people are talking, it just sounds like it could be the military, but it's apparently the government. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
It just could have been handled better, and I can see how somebody might have a hard time keeping track of things because a lot of
Okay.
people are fucking imbeciles and can't keep track of things that aren't even that difficult to keep track of.
Fair enough.
And I know that sounds harsh, but there's a reason to keep it simple, stupid
Yeah.
is a phrase.
Okay. And you think that was just too complicated or not well enough explained that I guess the average person would get
I think
confused and not keep up with it?
I think it's a combination of that just never having that time to stop and rest and explain it,
Okay.
with there being so much unique terminology to
Okay.
where it makes it difficult for some people to follow.
All right, that makes
And
sense.
and also another thing that 10 has the advantage of is it has a clear protagonist in Tdas.
Yeah,
So you're following one character and you're getting it from his perspective.
and it's more or less strictly his perspective,
Yeah,
and not
13.
not trying to like juggle the different stories and viewpoints and everything from 13.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's another one where it makes things easier for people to follow when you only have one character. That's you know, it just
Yeah,
is. I'm not
it is.
I'm not blaming 13. I'm just saying.
No, I mean I personally like the big cast and the no direct main character, but it is definitely easier to follow if there is.
Hey, you seriously should give 6 a try.
I've been meaning to.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, these are why one is more accepted in a broad sense than the other. I don't
Okay.
think that these are reasons why 10 is better than 13.
One's not necessarily better, but one is easier to be a part of or get into.
One is easier for a fan base to accept than the other.
Okay.
And I mean, that there are things, oh, this is just kind of a one off,
Okay.
but it ties back into something we discussed before
Okay.
in our Final Fantasy discussion, where in our Final Fantasy discussion, I was making fun of whatever Edward's wife's death
Mhm.
because you just kind of walk in on it and have no context.
Mhm.
And you were like, oh, she's dying, so you should be sad. And I disagreed.
Yeah.
Well, I actually like the way that Hope's mom's death is handled in 13. And
Because you know her a little bit more.
I think it provides a good contrast because you get to see something of her before she dies.
Yeah.
Not enough
A
that,
lot.
you're going to cry or anything, but she at least does something cool. You get to see her, like a bit of her personality. So
Yeah.
then you understand what it is you've lost. Like, oh, she
Okay.
was a mother. She was somebody who was willing to face danger to protect her son and this strange dumbass.
Mhm.
Like, she was a decent, you know,
Person.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, good first impressions.
Yeah.
And then she died. And it's like, okay, that's all they needed. And they did it perfectly.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. Like, you need some context. When it's somebody I don't know just died, who
Yeah.
has no connection to me or anybody,
Okay.
aside from being the daughter of some random psychotic old man I met in a cave, I don't feel emotions
Well.
because people die every day and I don't feel emotions about it
Well.
because you don't feel emotions about random people dying. So you just need to contextualize, you just need enough of that person to make them not random.
Okay.
So
I don't know where this came from, but okay.
it was just something I noticed playing the game when she died. I was like, oh, that sucks.
Ah.
She was cool. She was a cool mom.
Okay.
And it was a Final Fantasy death that like actually had, made me go, that sucked, rather than
Yeah.
I don't fucking care. Or this is just gonna be undone 5 hours from now.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
every death is undone. God damn it,
Uh,
Final Fantasy IV.
a good lot of them. Yeah.
I think Tella is the only one who actually dies.
Well.
Spoilers.
Alright.
But yeah, no, I'm enjoying 13 so far. I know it probably sounded like I was just
Ripping on
dump
it.
dripping on it, which is why I wanted to bring up that thing that it did well.
Okay.
It's just more why I think one is more approachable than the other.
I think approachable is actually a decent term because I don't want to say one is better than the other or not, but I have no problem agreeing with one is definitely more approachable, especially to a fan of that old school style. One is definitely more approachable and more easy to get into than the other.
And I want to dispel the idea that 10 isn't super linear because it has an airship. The fuck off. You get the airship literally at the buttfuck end of the game. Like, yeah, there are a few things you can do with the airship to go back, but it's not a whole lot, and it doesn't radically change anything.
Yeah.
It's basically you completed the game. Here's quick travel.
Okay.
Like fucking thanks. Like literally, the progression is from when you get the airship
Yeah.
is fight Sin,
Okay.
and
And
then
that's it.
go inside Sin. Like that's the plot progression from when you get the airship. Like you don't saying the game improves when you get the airship is as stupid as saying Final Fantasy 13 improves when you get to Pulse. You get
Yeah.
to Pulse in chapter 11 of 13 fucking chapters.
Yeah, but you can stay there for like 20 hours if you want.
You can, but
I mean, I get your point. It is at the very end of the game, and it's not enough of a thing to majorly determine the game.
well, and there's no
But you,
plot progression on Pulse
no,
outside of the
there's
very
very
first
little.
area and then where you go. All there is to do on Pulse is the hunts,
It's all just side quests.
which
It's all side quests and grinding.
yeah, which is one of the common defenses I see of 13. It's like, well, it opens up eventually. It's like, no, there's one area that's open,
Like there's a big open area, and that's it.
and
Yeah.
it comes at the trail end of the game,
Hmm.
and the only thing to do there is hunt.
Yeah.
And like, I don't give a shit, but that's not a
It,
good
it,
defense.
it's a good thing, but in that argument, it's not a good defense.
Like, I would never use Pulse as a defending point for 13 because you're essentially trying to use one area to
Hmm.
excuse the entire rest of the game design.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying for the airship as well.
Okay.
It's the same concept. Like, no,
It's not enough of a thing to justify the rest of the game.
like I said, you can't use one area of the game to excuse the design philosophy for literally everything else.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That make perfect sense.
And I will give 13 this also over 10. I just have to give 13 some points now because like I said,
Because you complained for a little bit.
if it comes to approachability, it is so much easier to defend 10, but that doesn't
It,
mean that 13 doesn't do certain things better than 10. The voice acting, for starters, just oh my god, it really helps make the characters more alive.
it does.
And I'm gonna give it time. It might be too early to say this. I might fucking next week on this show say I take this all back.
Yeah.
But
But what?
the characters don't bug me this time. I feel like I appreciate more what's going on. I think Snow.
To be honest, last time I played, they didn't bug me nearly as much. I used to really hate Snow and Hope the first time I played it, but last time playing through it, I actually kind of, you know, didn't have any
Understood
issues
them
with it all.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Snow needs to be a bit younger because I think his personality trait is like that 19 to 20-year-old. I'm
Yeah.
on the cusp of I'm transitioned into an adult and I can do anything.
I'm technically an adult, but
At heart,
doesn't really act. Yeah.
yeah, he's that tough guy jock who has no fucking clue how to actually do anything but thinks he knows everything.
But here's my question: how old is he versus how old does he just look? Does he just look
That's
really old?
yeah, that's the thing. I think he looks older than he is. Let me look this up. Snowvol Final Fantasy 13. Yeah, fuck it. I don't know his name.
Yeah,
Snowvilliers. Okay, yeah, he's 21.
which is age. He just does not look
Yeah,
21.
he just
He looks
looks
like
too old.
35.
Which yeah. So I think in terms of his, he just looks too old. That like
Mm,
if you made him look younger, it would fix so
so many
much.
problems. It would.
So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with Snow this time because again, I appreciate where he's coming from in that respect.
Hmm.
Hope doesn't bug me this time.
Hope didn't bug me really at all last time either.
He's a fucking kid,
He
and
is a kid.
he's not an anime 15-year-old who swings a giant sword around with no problems.
No, he's not a badass anime 15-year-old. He's a normal one who kind of freaked the fuck out when his mom was killed in front of him.
And just again has not had a chance to chill, and
Hmm.
then gets paired off with Lightning, who has emotional problems of her own, and then
Hmm.
they end up feeding off of each other.
Yeah.
So no
So
problems
he's
with Hope.
yeah, he feels like a realistic 15-year-old, which is not fun, instead of an anime 15-year-old, which is fun, but
Well,
not realistic and doesn't make for a good story.
yeah, or obnoxious as shit. I'm thinking of
Yeah.
like the Tails characters, like Annis
Yeah.
or whatever, where it's like, you know what? I'll take fucking Hope over Annis any day.
Fair.
Um, and Vanille, I I appreciate more how her happiness is a facade.
Hmm.
I know that's kind of
She,
approaching it with the power, the benefit of hindsight,
it is, but
but her,
she's disguising her guilt behind this happiness.
yeah, like her flippancy is an act. She's not that dumb.
Hmm.
She's just trying really hard to stay positive when there is absolutely nothing to be positive about.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that more this time,
Hmm.
especially given the current climate of the world.
Faking positivity is still, yeah. No, I agree. I playing them more recently as an adult and appreciating the smaller nuances of the characters, I didn't hate them nearly as much as I did when I played it, what, 10 years ago or however the hell long it was.
Yeah, and I never really cared much for Saz, but now I feel like he's the most sensible one of the group.
I love Saz. Saz is fucking great.
I legitimately feel like he is the sensible one
He is. He's the
because
only one who's like a rational adult.
yeah, Lightning is too pissed off at everything. Snow is
Hmm.
too immature.
Hmm.
Hope is too pissed off at everything, which is why it's really bad when he gets paired with Lightning.
Yeah.
You don't stick two angry people alone in a room. That's a bad idea.
Hey, here's a knife. Go stab someone if you want to. Okay.
You want to stab Snow with this knife? You'll be doing me a favor.
Yeah, right.
Uh, and Vanille's, she's your optimist. She's the one that's trying to be happy,
She's your she's your unrealistic optimist.
but that's not really who she is.
Yeah.
That's kind of the role that has been forced on her.
Hmm.
And I'm obviously still a long way from Fang, so I can't comment on that. Just cut the cast a break. There's actually a lot more going on there than
Then
Hope
at
is a
first,
whiny little. Yeah, Hope
yeah,
is a whiny little faggot.
it's easy to say that he's a whiny little bitch, and it looks like he's a whiny little bitch compared to regular Final Fantasy or just anime or game characters. But there's a reason for it.
And it's really not out of character or like I
No,
know that
it's what a
that's
realistic person that age with that personality would do in that scenario.
yeah, and
It's not exciting to watch or fun or heroic or anything, but it's surprisingly realistic at times.
yeah. So yeah, I'm enjoying it,
Hmm.
and I hope I continue enjoying it.
Yeah,
And I feel like all I've done this fucking entire thing is talk, but
that's fine. I'm trying to talk a little bit less this time.
so I mean I have nothing else really to say this week.
Next week I'll have some topics, I'm sure. It'll be my
Um,
rant.
I do have one other thing I could bring up, but nah, don't worry about it.
Save it for next time.
I'll save it for when slash if we do a Dragon Quest one. So
All
that,
one and a half that I've played. Cool.
yeah. So that's our episode for this week, and fuck.